welcome back. Today I'm going to be making some miniature versions of my pets. I teased this in the mini-me making video and I have a couple of different techniques I want to try. So without further ado, let's get into the video. I'm going to start out with my most tried and true method for making miniature animals. You may have noticed a little miniature poodle floating around some of my dioramas, and the way I made her was by needle felting, so I know that it definitely works pretty well for dogs. And I have 2 of those, so I think I shall start with them. First things first, I like to start out by making a kind of armature skeleton for the dog, and for that I'm going to be using these like basic chenille kids pipe cleaners that I got in a value pack from Hobbycraft. I have used them before for a craft that didn't quite work out, so they are slightly shredded in places, but I think that's not really going to be a big deal for this. I'm not completely certain exactly how precise I'm going to be with this in terms of making it to scale. I did manage to measure the first dog. His name is Teddy and he is a border collie, we think. He was a rescue from the RSPCA, so we aren't like entirely certain of his heritage. We do know his mum was a border collie, but he has a little bit of a cattle dog shape to him, as do his siblings, so there might be a little bit of that in there. Either way, he is 61 centimeters from paw to shoulder, so scaling that down for 1/6 scale, he's gonna need to be 10 centimeters from paw to shoulder in miniature. So I guess I'm just gonna kind of go roundabouts that kind of size. There's probably going to be a fair bit of just eyeballing this involved, so I'm going to get my first pipe cleaner and fold it in half, and then twist the looped end a few times to make a neck, and I'm going to make this a little bit longer than it needs to be so that when we add the head we can kind of put this neck part up into the head to give it a bit more stability. Then I think I can either keep twisting to turn the rest of this into the body, or I could split it in the middle and have these be the 2 front legs, or the start of them anyway. Let me just measure. Okay, they are about 10 centimeters, so if that's the foot and that's about the shoulder, I think for Ted we're going to go with the second option and have these be the starts of the legs. So I'm just going to kind of bend them so they have a little bit of a right angle at the top for shoulders. It doesn't need to be super accurate or anything, because of course we're going to be building this up later with felting. Then I'm going to take a second pipe cleaner and twist it onto one of the legs. And then when I get to that shoulder bit, I'm going to wrap it around a few times, making my way onto the other front leg, and then twisting all the way down that one as well. Any excess we can either cut off, or I'm just going to twist back up the leg so that I don't waste any of it. Now we have 2 much sturdier armatures for the front legs, and we can move on to the body. I've got a third pipe cleaner and I'm going to again fold this one in half. And then I'm going to put the looped end over the neck stub that we've made, twist it around to secure it, and then fold one end over one shoulder and the other end over the other shoulder. Hopefully that makes sense. And then we can twist them together. Now, this is a fair bit too long for Ted's body, so we're going to designate about the last third of it to be his tail armature. Then I'm going to fold another pipe cleaner in half, slip the looped end over the tail armature, twist it a couple of times like we did with the neck to secure it. And that's still a little bit loose, so I'm going to take one end and fold it over the top of the armature one way, and take the other end and fold it the other way. And now that feels a lot more secure, so I'm just going to add, again, another little right angle for some hip structure. Check that they are all about the same length. Okay, I think we're doing all right. And then I shall take one last pipe cleaner and double up the back legs, just like we did with the front ones. And now we have our armature looking about as sturdy as a newborn alpaca, but I promise it will start to look much more like a dog once we add the felting. Now to start off with, I just have lots of plain white wool to add, and I'm just going to pull some of this apart and then just gradually start wrapping it around the armature. Obviously, this is not quite the thickness that I want for my finished project. However, I need to secure this first couple of layers in place by felting it, and for that I will need a needle felting needle. I don't know how well you can see, but these have tiny barbs along the length to help our fibers mat into place. And they are very sharp. It hurts a lot if you accidentally stab yourself with one, so please be careful if you're going to try and do this at home. Those little silicone finger protectors are very useful to avoid that, but I don't have any, so I'm just gonna try and be as cautious as I can and just repeatedly stab it into the wool that we've wrapped around. And this should mat the fibers together into one kind of solid piece. Okay, now that I have felted all the way around, our base is much sturdier and securely held in place. So now I'm going to go ahead and repeat that process down the legs, neck, and tail. He's still kind of giving greyhound, but now that I have a good solid base to work on, I can start bulking up some areas to kind of sculpt the shape we want. In particular, I need to add a decent bit of bulk to his chest as well as the front portion of his thigh, so as to create that kind of like, I think it's called digitigrade? Is that it? The word for like animal legs? You know, like this sort of shape? Wait, this? Hang on. This sort of shape? Hopefully you know what I mean. We definitely have a more dog-like shape forming now. I did go ahead and slightly bend forwards the ends of the back legs and slightly bend backwards the tops of the front legs. And for some breeds, we could stop here in terms of the body base. However, Ted, like I said, he's a bit more barrel-chested than the average collie, hence the possible, like, healer connection. And it is taking quite a long time to build up volume on the chest here. I could potentially have added another pipe cleaner to the skeleton to kind of pre-form a chest shape if I had thought ahead. However, since I don't really want to risk ruining what we already have by just adding more and more wool onto his chest, I'm going to try and make like a separate piece so that we can build up the volume ahead of time and won't need to felt quite so much into the existing body. And then I can just lay that separate piece on top and felt it into place. Okay, the body's all done now, so we need to tackle the head. And I have two possible ways of doing this. The first is to just literally take a piece of our wool and ball it up like you would a piece of clay or something. And sometimes the friction from your hands is enough to kind of mat the fibers into a sort of ball shape. And then you can go in and just kind of felt it a little bit more until it's the shape you want. Then once you are satisfied with the shape, obviously this will need to be poked onto the head. So you're going to want to also felt a hole into it and then just gradually try and make it wider and wider until it will fit over the top of the neck armature. And then once the hole is big enough, obviously then you can add it on top of your neck armature. But as I'm sure you have already noticed, this is quite a bit too small for our little dog here. I plan on using the second option, which is literally to just wrap a few layers of wool around the top of the neck, felting it into place as I go. So I can once again just gradually build up the layers. And the reason I prefer this method to the first one I showed is because I feel like I can kind of control how much of the wool is ending up towards the front of the head rather than the back. And that shape kind of gives us a better jumping off point to start making a snout. Because now when I add some more layers of wool, I'm going to be wrapping them around the front of the head, felting it in place mostly on the sides between layers. Any excess that kind of extends around the back, I'm going to fold forwards so that all that volume's going to end up on the front of the head. It's looking a little bit duck-like right now, but once we have a decent base for the snout, I can take some more of the wool and this time wrap it the opposite direction around the snout that we're forming. And then we need to felt that in place, not just on the sides anymore, but all the way around, including the end of the snout. I just kept going until I had something like Ted's face shape. And now we pretty much have our base all finished. So I also went ahead and made a smaller one for my other dog. Since it's basically just the exact same process, I didn't think there was any real point going through it all again on camera. The only major difference is that I haven't added any wool to the ends of the legs yet for her, because she is mostly black and grey, and obviously, especially on this smaller scale, I won't need a lot of wool to cover the legs, so I wanted to do the first layer in the right colour, if that makes sense. And the other thing is that she has slightly different proportions because she is half Cocker Spaniel, half German short-haired pointer. So she has that very slender kind of hound dog shape to her, but just in miniature, basically. She kind of just looks like a permanent pointer puppy, except with like a slightly softer face and longer ears, and very spanielish eyes also. She and Ted also have very different tails. He has a big floofy tail, and she has like a thin, kind of just like bony tail. Both of her like breed descendants quite commonly have their tails docked, but she does not. So when she wags too close to you, and she wags constantly, it feels like being cracked by a whip. So because I needed her tail to be really thin, this is just purely felted wool. There's no armature in here. Whereas Ted, of course, needs his big fluffy wolf-like tail. So what I've done is felt a piece of wool into like a long lemon shape. It's kind of pointy at this end and a bit more flat at this end and then wide in the middle. And what I'm going to do is just wrap it around the little armature stub that we gave him and felt the two sides together underneath like a seam. Once the two sides are pretty well secured together, I can just go in and felt around the whole thing, tapering the end a fair bit to get the shape we want, and then felting any excess wool into his back to kind of smooth out the transition between his tail and body. And now our tail is all done. I did have to trim down the end a little bit. You're not really supposed to cut into needle felted projects. I think it can make the wool unravel, but it seems to have worked fine here. And yeah, now our tail is all done, and we can finally move on to adding some patterns and colours to our little blank dogs. Since the focus has all been on Ted so far, I'm going to start out with Flossie. And like I said before, she has black legs and feet, so let's go ahead and add those. Now she has her black feet, and the rest of her body is like a dappled black, white, grey mix. It mostly comes out to grey with some black patches on her back and face. I'm probably going to try and add some dapple detail back in at the end, but for now I'm just going to go in and cover her whole body in grey wool. Ooh, a good thing about this grey wool actually is that it does have some colour variation in it, so I think that's gonna go really well with her actually. Knowing I would have to add a layer of this to her whole body is part of why I didn't build it up too far beforehand. However, since she is a pretty slender breed regardless, I still want to keep this layer of grey relatively thin. Plus, I guess having a little bit of white showing through will help with the dappled effect. Okay, I've got her whole body grey now, and I think for her head I'm going to start off by covering the whole thing in more black. Now I have the base down, I'm going to take a little bit of grey yarn and run it up over the top of the head, felt that into place. And then once it's mostly secured, I'm going to take the rest of it and wrap it around the snout. And felt that all into place as well. I can really see her little face starting to take shape now, so I'm going to add the rest of her markings. She has 3 big black spots or patches on her back. One at the top of her tail, one just here, I think, and then the biggest one sort of goes over this shoulder. All these spots are finished now, and I also went downstairs to have a look and check I had got the shape of this one correct, and realised that her legs are nowhere near as dark as I had felted them. It's more a case of her feet being black, and then lots of little black freckles around her ankle that kind of thin out as they go up the leg. So I've just gone back in and covered the lower half of her legs with a thin layer of more grey wool, and we'll have to see what we can do about the freckles later, but for now the last thing I need to add to her is her ears. They are pretty long, kind of floppy spaniel ears, and I just went ahead and felted them separately, and now I can go ahead and attach one to each side of her head. Ta-da! I think she's looking pretty much like herself now, and I need to move on to adding the last felted bits to Teddy. As I think I mentioned, Ted is mostly white to begin with, so he has a lot less that I need to add to him in terms of felting. However, he does still have very similar kind of black markings on his face to Flossie, and interestingly enough, they have almost the same configuration of black patches on their backs. He only has 2, but he has one almost in exactly the same place over his shoulder and another right at the base of his tail, and it's just really cute because they're like best friends, and he's about 3 years old and she is 1 year old, so he's very much like her big brother, you know? So it's just very cute to me anytime I'm looking at them and they're just like almost matching. I'm just going to repeat the same process to add his matching spots. Okay, I only remembered halfway that the patches on Ted's face aren't symmetrical. On this side, his eye is in the white space, and on this side, his eye is in the black space. So I had to go in afterwards and kind of fix that up, but I think I've got it to work now. And like I did with Flossie's ears, I made Ted's separately. And I must confess, I haven't ever actually made a dog breed that doesn't have, like, floppy ears. And Ted's are not pointy exactly either. They're, like, sort of halfway between the two. So fingers crossed I'm able to attach these in a way that looks like him. I think I'm gonna have to put them upright to felt them on and then bend them down afterwards. But then that kind of raises the question of how to secure it. Maybe I can like partially felt the fold down. Okay, I think that sort of works. Let's try and replicate that on the other side. Okay, we have our markings fully on our little dogs now, at least the ones that I was able to felt on there. In particular, Teddy has lots of little very faint greyish black dots in various places on his body. It's another reason I kind of wonder if he has a little bit of blue heeler in him. But they are so tiny and sporadic that I don't think I could accurately add them in using wool. Same thing with Flossie's little leg freckles, as well as some white spots that she has all over her body, and also some shading around their noses. So my solution for this is to paint them on with some very watered down acrylic paint, and yeah, let's just see how that goes. Excuse my little dino-shaped plaster, I did wind up stabbing myself with the felting needle after all, and it's very sore. But I did finish painting the dogs, and I'm super happy with how they turned out. Before this point, particularly with Ted, I was kind of like, oh, it doesn't quite look like him, but something about the speckles really helped, and Flossie's feet definitely look much better blended than they were as well. I'm going to go ahead and add some finishing touches to these guys in the form of some eyes and noses that I pre-made from polymer clay and baked. I don't know how well you can see that, but I'm just going to glue them onto the heads for now, and when they're dry I would like to go back in and add a little bit of extra painted detail and some gloss, which I think is just going to be too difficult to try and do beforehand since they are so tiny and they roll away so easily. Okay, so as you can see, I also went in and painted the eyes on these guys to give them a bit more character, as well as glossing their noses. And I was going to bring that up after I had finished painting my cats, because the original plan was of course to do all of my pets in this one video. I have made the cats, however I have just finished editing down all my footage, and with all 4 in the same video, it comes out to about 50 minutes. and I don't think anyone is gonna watch me for that long. So I'm going to cut the video in half, and then the cats will be next week. I also make the cats using a different crafting technique. No more needle felting for them. So if you're curious to find out what I made them from, tune in next week to see that. I do hope you enjoyed seeing these little puppies get made. Let me know down in the comments if you think I got a decent resemblance, as well as if you'd be interested in attempting to needle felt any of your pets. With that being said, thank you very much for watching. If you enjoyed, I would very much appreciate a like and maybe even a subscribe if you'd like to see more. And I will see you next time. Bye!